Funding for the program is provided by the Harry S. and Isabel C. Cameron Foundation and other contributors. It happens every year in San Miguel de Allende, an old colonial town in the hills of Guanajuato, near the very center of Mexico. The men, women, and children each year begin the Easter observance with a procession. This procession recalls those that began 450 years ago, when Christianity was first brought to the indigenous here. At midnight, 2 weeks before Easter Sunday, hundreds of people come from San Miguel to the sanctuary of Atotonilco to accompany an image of Jesus Christ as it is carried 7 miles into town. There are 3 figures shrouded in silk scarves given by the faithful. With the figures of Christ and his mother Mary is St. John. St. John, the only apostle who remained with Christ and observed his death from the foot of the cross. St. John also represents the people who are in the procession, who will accompany, observe, and relive Christ's trial, death, and resurrection during the next 2 weeks. The procession is organized and carried out by laymen. Their number grows to thousands as the images are carried to San Miguel. The shrouded images are carried through arches of flowers, the tradition carried over from Aztec processions. Tonight it is dark and cold. With the dawn, they enter San Miguel. The statues are unveiled. Rays of light, potencias, streaming from Christ's head, represent his divine human capabilities, memory, knowledge, and will. The rope halter foreshadows his death. Mexican religious art is characterized by grim and bloody realism that sometimes shocks the unwary. The turbulent history of Mexico has produced a Catholicism steeped in pain and suffering. Lent began 4 weeks earlier in all the churches of San Miguel, with the ceremony of the ashes, here placed by the pastor of the Church of San Juan de Dios. Lent, Quaresma, begins on Ash Wednesday. Into current times, old women from the country tried to keep ashes intact on their foreheads for the 40 days of Lent. They slept with little plates tied securely over the ashes. In Mexico, the Christianity of Western Europe, of Spain, blended into the existing indigenous culture. In his book, The Medieval Heritage of Mexico, Dr. Luis Beckman writes, "Mexico is not Spain, nor is it exclusively composed of Indians. Yet in this culture of ours, a branch of Western culture with essential indigenous elements, the Indian's contribution is what has gradually created the outline of the authentically Mexican."
The culture brought from Spain to Mexico in what regard God and the world was still very medieval. It was a world which was conceived as a unity, and assumed two different aspects: a universal church and a universal empire, a lay society and a religious society, and they were interconnected.
Within Mexican life, dark and bright are mixed. Even within suffering, there is room for happiness. It is a paradox the Franciscan friars who settled this valley understood. In 1542, Friar Juan de San Miguel came here with Spanish soldiers and friendly Indians to establish a frontier outpost. The participation of the Indians was crucial. The Presidio San Miguel of the Chichimecas was to provide safety to settlers and to the caravans carrying silver to Mexico City from the rich mines of Zacatecas, safety from the roaming Indians of this desolate region. Believing the millennium was coming, the Franciscan friars came to prepare the Indians and to await the second coming of Christ. They brought new ideas to some of the Indian tribes who had long been subject to tribal wars of conquest and raids for sacrificial victims. The God-man Jesus Christ, the friars taught, had died on the cross to redeem fallen man. No more need die. But some inhabitants needed a miracle before they were converted. In Tlaxcala, an incident gave them what they were looking for.
In the 4th year after the arrival of the friars in this land, it rained very much, ruining the cornfields and causing many dwellings to collapse.
Because of the devastating rains, one of the first processions in the New World took place to implore God's mercy. That day the rain stopped. It was a turning point in the Indians' acceptance of the Christian message.
Immediately the Indians made many crosses, banners of saints, and other ornaments to be used in processions. And forthwith the Indians of Mexico came to get patterns of them to fashion processional platforms of gold and feathers to adorn their churches, to make retables and ornaments to hold processions.
Even then, not all tribes were responsive. San Miguel of the Chichimecas was attacked and burned to the ground in 1551. On this old map, heads indicate the place where 2 friars were killed by cruel Indians in the 1580s.
Friar Francisco Doncel took in his company Friar Pedro de Burgos, an old priest and servant of God. They left from the Villa of Celaya for that of San Miguel. And on going through a narrow pass, there fell upon them some pagan Chichimeca Indians, of those who abhor the Christian name, and with much cruelty they killed them with arrows.
Tradition holds that one friar was carrying this image of Christ crucified, called the Lord of the Conquest, Señor de la Conquista, and that traces of the friar's blood can still be seen on the image. This Christ, the oldest image from San Miguel's long history, is surprisingly light. Made in the Indian manner of corn stalks and hemp and covered in orchid paste, made to be carried in processions. The Franciscan message took effect. Father Jose Luis Soto has spent several years cataloging the Franciscan archives in nearby Celaya, making documents available for study, including books of the cofradías, lay organizations responsible for physical and spiritual works, and arrangements for feast days and processions.
Basically, the Franciscan spirituality based on devotional sense of Christian life. You don't look at Christ as a mystery. You don't look at Christ as something which is far beyond, but you feel Christ is close to you. He cries with you, he suffers with you, he consoles you.
Early in Lent, on the eve of the feast of Señor de la Conquista, Javier Zavala conducts an hour of live radio commentary about events that will begin tonight with the traditional vigil of the dancers.
The most important part of the celebration, though some ask if it is profane, not sacred, the most important part has been the 33 creeds.
The dancers will spend the night in vigil, singing and making offerings for the altar of Señor de la Conquista. The burning copal produces an incense that predates Christian worship in Mexico. The next morning, the pastor blesses them and their offerings and reminds them in his homily, La conquista es individual. The conquest is within the single soul. The lead dancers back out of the church to show reverence. After the Mass, music and dancing begin and will continue all day. Intent, the dancers watch the leader and copy his steps. Some steps, like the Copal blessing in the Vigil, repeat the form of the cross, a symbol known and reverenced by the Indians before the coming of the friars. Inside the church, worshippers recite the 33 creeds, acts of faith honoring the 33 years of Christ's life. In the afternoon, a processional dance moves into the streets and atrium in front of the church of La Parroquia. The dance of the Ocho Locos, the 8 crazies. The wounded bull, taunted like fallen man. In the early 18th century, San Miguel grew rapidly into an important colonial center, known as San Miguel el Grande. The buildings from that time reflect the rationalists' belief that social harmony could be promoted through balanced architecture and sound civic planning. The churches of San Miguel balance the intellectual with the spiritual. In the period of the 18th century growth, many existing churches were enlarged and many new ones were established. Rich individuals like Don Tomás de la Canal, who built this house, were responsible for both secular and sacred buildings. Such builders were often influenced by energetic churchmen. A young priest named Luis Felipe Alfaro worked here between 1730 and 1740. This Calvario and the Via Crucis leading up to it are his inspiration. Alfaro was spiritual advisor to Josefa, the oldest daughter of the De la Canal family. Alfaro encouraged her desire to establish a convent for women like herself, who wished to spend their lives in the service of God. 18th century colonial Mexico was distanced from the intellectual forces that swept over Europe. The rulers of New Spain attempted to sequester it from the ideas of the European rationalists. Because they believed that the human intellect was the only route to knowledge, the rationalists were hostile to the supernatural and to the clergy. On Friday, 2 days before Palm Sunday, honor is paid to the sufferings of Mary, beginning with Mass in the Church of the Oratorio. Long lines of people wait to confess their sins. The daytime fireworks seem strange at first. The blast traditionally demands for heaven's attention. The smoke, trails of prayers for health, for sight, for change of heart.